Welcome to this OnKey webinar, and the theme today is clarifying solution-based enterprise asset management system integration. Obviously, we believe it is a very exciting topic, and we hope you find it very informative, and we'd love to share some information with you today. I'm Dirk Jansen van Rensburg. I am the Managing Director for the OnKey Software Solutions business within the Pragma group of companies. And I'm joined here today by Stefan Swanepoel. He's the Head of Product Development, and JP de Koker, who is our OnKey Integrate Product Owner. JP will do most of the talking, but myself and Stefan will also try and contribute to this very interesting discussion. Welcome, gentlemen. So we're going to switch off our cameras now. So I think you've seen enough of our faces for in this first 2 minutes. I'd like to invite you as well to, let me just find the camera button here somewhere, but then I'll try and speak in parallel. I'll find the camera button just now. I'd like to invite you to participate in this webinar. So at the bottom of your screen, I believe there is a Q&A icon. You're welcome to hit that and post a question. Myself, Stefan and JP will review it and we'll try to answer those. We've got two options. Either we can just reply via text, and we'll do that throughout the webinar, or at the end of the session, we'll stand still for a couple of minutes and we'll try to answer it verbally as well, if time allows. Let me get going. So I'm going to start this webinar session. And as normally with these kind of sessions, I'd love to set the scene, just create a bit of context, a shared understanding, and have a bit of a wider look at what is happening in industry and share some trends and interesting pieces of research. Stefan will then go one level deeper. He'll talk about some technology trends and some technology aspects that one needs to consider when we're really talking about system integrations. And then, for the largest part of this webinar, we'll hand over to JP, where it's really going to go into detail and really share some examples and some use cases with us, and I'm sure you'll be able to learn quite a lot from that. So let's get going. So I'd like to in this first section of the webinar try to answer two leading questions. And the first is, what is driving the need for system integration? And secondly, seeing that we are really approaching this from an enterprise asset management point of view, why is system integration so important from an enterprise asset management perspective? And I'll try to answer these two questions by referencing some research. And the first piece of research I'm going to reference is some research done by Gartner. And immediately you'll notice that this is not an EAM piece of research, and I don't think that's necessarily even applicable to be EAM specific. Over the last number of years, it's been a huge debate, a constant debate around CIOs and the selection in terms of software in their IT strategy. And what is the best, integrated suites, where you look at large vendors actually trying to put together a very holistic and complete system that really covers all the needs of businesses, or best of breed, where you rather go out and define all your different requirements, selecting the best product for your needs, and ultimately integrating these things together. So that's always been this big debate, I believe, within the ICT and IT strategies going forward. And this piece of research, and again, it's in a year or two old and not even EAM related, but you can at least see this is something that a lot of people is thinking about. And in this specific sector, you could see that there was at that point in time a move away from this large integrated suites more towards best of breed. Now, we all might have our own preferences and opinions, but it's certainly always been a debate. And obviously at the back of this, there's a big integration need. If we were to move towards the best of breed solution, the need for lots of system to system integrations becomes greater versus the option of going for the integrated suite. The integrated nature of the product, the theory is that less integrations is required for that. But what I found to be very interesting is that one of the very large integrated suite CEOs CEO of one of these large integrated suite companies or vendors made the following statement: the idea of containing a business entirely on a single application has simply just become less realistic. So even the people, the biggest advocates for these large integrated suites, now I'm sure there is good reason to go for that as an IC selection. But even if you go for that, the need for integration is still growing and it still exists. And the reason for that is businesses needs to integrate often now with external vendors, external parties, with clients. And even within their business, there's now many services sitting outside of their business, cloud service that becomes available. All of these things requires a level of system to system integration. So even if you do go for a large integrated suite approach, the need for integration is constantly growing. And the need for each business to clearly understand and define their own approach towards system integration is becoming imperative, and it remains imperative if the business wants to become more competitive in the industry they're playing. Now, if we were to shift our focus a little bit more specific to enterprise asset management, research group Verdantix did the following research very recently, it's towards the end of last year, where they evaluated all of these. In this graphic, you can see it, all of these different criteria, and ask the people as part of this research, which ones of these do they consider to be the most important when selecting industrial asset management software. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that the most important evaluation criteria for industrial asset management software is the ability of the software to have an open architecture for integration with industrial software, business systems, and sensors. So, people in this audience and the Pragma people included, we obviously see that and understand that the ability of your industrial asset management software's ability to integrate with other systems, and more so with sensors as well on the edge side, on the asset side as well. All of that is really becoming imperative for us to move forward digitalization efforts in asset management, and the need for the software to support that is becoming crucial. So the ability to have these open architectures and the ability to integrate is becoming incredibly important. Traditionally, in the asset management space, the ability to integrate transactional data has always been there. And normally, and I'm sure JP is going to talk to some of those examples, the ability to integrate your enterprise asset management system with ERP systems, typically around stock management transactions. But if we were to shift our focus a little bit more to the whole digital twin concept, and that's really bringing together multiple sources to digitally represent the physical assets, there's a number of sources that you need to bring together. And the only way you can really do that is with good and robust and dependable systems integration. And my last slide is, again, just to create that context. Within the asset management space, this is where it's all leading towards, the ability to create that digital representation of your plant or of your assets. And again, the Verdantix group has done, I think, very good research and published some models around that in terms of how you can construct these digital twins. And they've identified 6 different sources of data that you want to pull into this digital twin. And we don't have to read through all of those, but depending on the maturity of your business and the sophistication of the digital twin that you want to build, you need to identify these different sources. And back to this webinar, the ability to then integrate those into a single source and really bring all those data together is becoming important. And most organizations, of an industrial nature, is looking to build some sort of digital twin, and from there the need comes to arise for having sophisticated and robust integrations in place. So I hope that sets the scene on why in the asset management world, integrations is becoming more and more important and more crucial to drive our digitalization and innovation agendas in asset management. I'm going to hand over to Stefan now. Like I said, Stefan is our head of product development, and he's going to unpack it a bit more in terms of the technology and the evolution of the technology space, whereafter he's going to hand over to JP, who's going to take us through some more practical examples. Over to you, Stefan.
Right, thank you, Dirk. Yeah, so maybe before we start looking at any of the details here, I think as Dirk mentioned, the integration between different systems becoming more and more important as we move to digitally transform our businesses. And I think what all of you would recognize in that one seen over the past few years is that every system that wants to compete and participate in such ecosystems have over time put a lot of effort into developing their application programming interface is really the entry point into, or into a system. So a lot of effort going into that from most systems that want to take this integration route seriously. And I think, as most of us know, integration has had a long history. I think the value has always been clear, but there's always been challenges with that as well. And I think that if we start looking at that, looking at the traditional approaches, Progma ourselves also with clients over the years had, a long road of different ways of integrating with systems that, if we look back now, have been more or less successful in certain cases, and certainly had these different challenges. And I think, you'll recognize these, your traditional file import, export based integrations where, you could potentially automate it, having some schedule running to import and export data, or even just manually import and export the data through the user interface of the system. We at some point at Pragma started using the Microsoft SQL Server Integration Studio to do some integrations for us. And then there were obviously multiple such other tools that could do that type of work. Traditionally more your ETL, extract, transform, and load type systems. We've used this with some success, but it had many challenges, and we'll look at that as we go on. Then what we've also seen at clients, especially if integration is a key requirement, literally developing specific custom integration applications, that has the ability to speak to the two systems that needs to share information, and then that being a custom application specifically to deal with that information. So that was one of the solutions in the past. What one also sees, and even nowadays, there's a lot of this available within the specific application that you have. There will be the ability to integrate with dedicated other systems. I think the challenge with that is, as Dirk mentioned as well, with a best of breed type environment where there are so many different data sources and targets to which you want to share or get information from, for any single system to integrate and have the ability to speak to the other system, becomes an impossible task. Dealing with the different versions and the different interfaces, etc., becomes quite a big challenge. So although this makes sense for often used integrations, the built-in integrations into core systems of record is often challenging and limiting, because you just don't have all the options. And then, what I'm sure some of you also come across, concept of the integration service, enterprise service bus, where there's a quite a complex mechanism where different applications can tie into this service bus to share information across the system. But the challenges that one came across with this is often these type of solutions required dedicated on-premise infrastructure, often custom developed code, especially in the case of custom integration applications or tools like SSIS or other such integration tools, which then needed to be maintained, and as versions change of either the source or target systems, that had to be updated. So always a big challenge to keep that working and keep it reliably operating. Other challenges, as things change, is the more traditional integration mechanisms are quite rigid. So it's not that easy to make changes to that. And then if your volumes of transactions increased, often you ran into challenges there to make the platform deal with the higher volumes of data. So challenges in that space are often the case as well. Along the same lines, the speed with which you could do these integrations, was often limited. You had to run it on some schedule, and then whether you run it daily or every hour or whatever frequency, it was often not fast enough, and then you always had this situation of still waiting for the integration to move the data from the one system to the other. One challenge that we especially with clients came across quite often is that these more traditional integration mechanisms often got stuck. For some reason they couldn't process a certain record, and then there's no easy way of knowing that the integration stopped. So often at month end, or when it's most critical, one would realize that the integration hasn't been running for the past few days, and now it's a big challenge and critical to actually get that going again. So the monitoring abilities of these old tools have been quite challenging, and in many cases, since these integrations had to be built up from quite a low level, ground up, the investment upfront to build the integration was quite high, and then the ongoing investment in terms of people and time to keep them going was also a challenge. So what we've seen over the past few years, quite a big move towards what's called a enterprise integration platform as a service. Is more the new way of dealing with integrations, where there's a lot of benefits, and I'll go through those quickly, as we go on, and then I'll unpack a little bit what the enterprise integration platforms is about. So, some of the benefits, as more organizations start to move their business software and some of the applications into the cloud or into the internet, a cloud-ready approach to deal with that is becoming more and more important. It's no longer just moving data on-premise between different systems, so that's important. What's the benefit of some of these integration platforms is that where in the past you had to have dedicated software infrastructure for it, nowadays it's possible that a lot of that can actually run in the cloud. So that saves quite a bit in terms of maintenance and support of those integration tools. The way in which the integrations are built, where in the past it involved a lot of complex custom code, C# or whatever scripting languages was used with these integration platforms, often there's the ability to, with no or very limited coding, actually build the integrations and quickly change those. So making quite a big difference. These platforms are also much more scalable. You've got much more flexibility in changing things, and if you need to replicate or scale out horizontally to have more processing power available, that's quite easy with these platforms. They built, to deal with big volumes of data, since it can easily scale. So that aspect is handled quite well. Most of them have got quite good monitoring capabilities built into them as well, with various alerts and various mechanisms to deal with problems that come up. So that problem of not knowing that certain integrations or transactions failed, was addressed quite largely by these type of platforms. And then, since one can actually start fairly small with a particular integration, and much of the complex work has already been developed as part of the platform, you can often start, quite cost effectively with a small integration, but you are not limited to scale that out over time. So all in all, certainly, and I'll get to that in a moment, making quite a big difference in terms of the ease with which one can integrate, especially in these best of breed type enterprise architectures that one wants to operate in. Now, looking at these enterprise integration platforms as a service, the Gartner definition for that, just to set the scene for that, what they refer to it as a combination of integration technology functionalities that are delivered as a suite of cloud services and designed to support enterprise class integration initiatives. Now, what's not coming out in this slide, and what's important, just a few other things to note is, although a lot of reference is made to cloud, many organizations and many clients that we still work with also have on-premise solutions. So even though it just references cloud here, important to look out for and note that these solutions need to have some hybrid integration capability that you can also deal with your on-premise data and systems. Other parts that are value here, often your more often used external systems will have these platforms will have built-in connectors for them, so they're ready for that. And then obviously quite a strong capability of dealing with various types of APIs. And you can deploy now this integration processing on-premise or in cloud, or whatever preference you will have. Now, one of the leading players in this space, and you'll see here, this is just the 2021 Gartner Magic Quadrant that I just included here for reference. quite a few now playing in the leader, the sixth quadrant here. Boomi being one of the prominent ones. That's made quite a big entrance in the market over the last few years, and steadily increasing their capabilities. And what happened on the Pragma side, as we just going to move over to the next. These are the bullets now, sorry I didn't share that. The different items in terms of what's important to look for in these integration platforms. And then what we started looking at in our world in terms of OnKey. OnKey obviously has quite an extensive integration interface, so that you can get data in and out of the system. But there's always the challenge of building the bridge between your system and the third-party system with which you want to integrate. And one could now go and build and develop a lot of that integration capability internally. What we rather decided to do is to partner with Boomi. So what we have these days is, together with the OnKey solution, you will also have the ability to use the Boomi integration platform. And this integration platform has all the capabilities that we look for, to do on-premise integrations, hybrid cloud on-premise, or just cloud-based integrations with good monitoring and all those benefits that goes with it. So I think the real message here is that these integrations platforms significantly reduce the complexity of and the reliability of integrations. And I think the rest of the discussion that JP will lead now is really just about the practices around integration and how we use a platform like Boomi to establish such integrations. So I'm going to hand over to JP now to take us through the rest of the webinar. Thank you, JP.
Thanks, Stefan, and thanks for taking us through that evolution of integration. Yeah, it's always interesting to know where we fit in and why we fit in at that specific area. So for today from myself, I'd like to take a bit of a deeper dive into integration, specifically to some detail on how to categorize your solution, things to look out for before you jump in. We're going to look at a bit of the industry standards and best practices, and also a few practical considerations and examples. I'm someone that really feels core practical steps, small practical steps that one can follow and can use, really helps you in actually getting to a robust solution. So there's a few practical steps that I'd like to share today. So just on the topic or what we are talking about today, basically just sketches the backdrop of what thoughts I would like to share, and this just talks to the importance of integrations in this case specifically in the EMS or CMMS context, and that in many cases the fact that you want to integrate often supersedes the solution, and this is normally a problem or an issue area where you actually, the client or the organization says we want to integrate before actually taking a few very specific steps to get to a solution that actually solves the problem or the issue at hand. And there are quite a few things that are already solved in integration space, but even though integration can be simpler and more effective recently, one really needs to have a clear path, as I said, to the solution rather than just jumping in with development. So what I want to first talk about is just what are the things that you need to consider and think about before jumping in. First and foremost, identify the problem and state what the solution has to solve. Plainly put, guys, start with defining the problem so that the scope of the solution is actually known by all stakeholders and members of the project. Secondly, an integration enables major processes to function optimally. And what this just states is that the focus should not be that you need an integration and rather that you need a solution. And this is the case that even if the system integration will form the whole or most of the solution, focus on what you're trying to solve and what aspects will form part of that solution. Third point I have over here is having a clear picture of the source data structure and ensure data integrity. Now, this can range from ensuring that there are no duplicate records in your source system, and they have a single version of the truth type structure. So basically, that you know that this record is the most up-to-date version of that specific entity across the organization, and it can range all the way through to having a specific naming convention in place, or having a specific protocol steps to follow to have data input in your source system. So all of these aspects affect, possibly might affect your process in integrating. So have a clear picture of the source data structure and make sure that you have data integrity. The last point on this page is critically analyze the impact and role of the solution in the existing architecture. So I'm going to jump into this in a bit more detail a bit later, but it's very important to ensure that you have a good picture of the context of your solution and yeah, as I said, the impact that it might have on existing systems or systems that are in the process of being implemented. Okay. When we look at companies implementing new technology solutions to manage their operations and implement the digital transformation strategy, information dispersion and dissonance can actually be a major blocking factor. Today, and I'm also touching again on something that both Dirk and Stefan mentioned, but organizations use several different software solutions to actually meet their business and operational needs. These needs might be something like maintenance or material management, finance processing or purchasing. And although there might be areas, of course, that these different systems or applications that the organization use, different parts that might overlap. As Stefan mentioned, this single solution covering all these areas of the business is actually very rarely successful, especially given the complexity of developing global software solutions that meet the company's needs fully. So the ability to actually integrate different systems, can help a company to drastically reduce time and resources. This helps improving the efficiency, the profitability, and plays a big role in boosting digital transformation. If we look at integration and the ability to integrate, these integration processes can be categorized in 3 main groups, if I could put it like that. And the first one is the traditional application to application integration. And this is where typically master data records are kept in sync. Something like a asset register or a material master, warehouses, thinking of bill of materials. So this is where you have a master system and plainly put the data is synchronized from the source to the target to ensure that you actually have availability of those records in the target system. The second type of integration that we see in practice and in organizations is the transactional data integration, and this is typically in support of a business process. So this helps you in actually executing your business process more effectively. This is typically an integration like work costing that needs to be integrated from one system to the next. If I could take a quick example, parts might be needed on a specific work order, and that's requested on a work order in the EAMS, but the actual costs might be issued or receipted from an ERP perspective, and that cost and how much the work actually, how many spares and how much work actually costed needs to come back to the EAMS for reporting purposes, for example. And the last one, bigger type of category that we have, is validation and automation. And this is to the point of digitizing manual actions. So this is typically where the action would have been manual by some person somewhere, and the integration process actually helps in automating some of those normally manual actions. Okay, this next slide is quite a cool slide for me. It has a few basic illustrations, but it really gives you an idea of exactly what the impact is. If we look at the illustration on the left, more data sources inevitably leads to more potential dependencies between those sources, and this can mean a very complex architecture. You must actually be aware of that, the cost of the complexity itself. So if we look at the second illustration, obviously it's not a real life example, but the illustration behind it just illustrates the fact that complexity itself just introduces unnecessarily complex architecture, and that complex architecture and complexity itself introduces indirect costs that the company will need to be paying for maintenance and information sharing in that space. Also important, the flip side of that is that without a well-defined integration strategy, or being ignorant to integration, organizations actually run the risk of using processes in which data silos are used and expanded. So where some application might have information that another application or stakeholder needs, but it's not integrated because of some reason. So there's a fine line between having more data sources, more dependencies, and having a more complex architecture versus not implementing integration for some reason, leading to data silos, and then actually just leading to data unavailability. And how to actually make sure that that does not happen, and how to make sure that that actually works as expected is having a unified approach, having a unified strategy to how you manage your data, having a formal, reliable way of defining how your data flows. And that's where this picture on the right comes in. It just illustrates a unified approach and in how you actually manage data and how you transfer data from one system to the next. So it's, for me, it's more important in defining what your data network looks like than just saying that you want to integrate and saying that data needs to flow from system A to system B. So have a clear picture of that and have a unified approach. Make sure everybody knows what that approach is from a practical perspective. Okay. Next up, I would like to jump into some of the best practice in industry. And in this, for this slide or for this conversation, I just took a few best practices and I'm going to try and sort of explain it with a few examples in industry. The first one is the integration provider and determining factors. Stefan talked a bit about what was and what is and where trends are going in the industry. I would like to just state that choosing who does the integration and choosing who's the owner of the integration is a very important and determining factor of how you're going to be integrating. Are you going to use an in-house type of solution, or are you going to use a best of breed a platform as a service type solution? And industry itself doesn't necessarily say yes, option 1 or option 2, but industry standard, gives you an idea of the important factors that you need to consider in deciding who manages your integration. There's three main points that I want to address there. The first one is the maturity of your software solution or the software vendor. At what maturity level are you actually looking at the integration, and what can the integration solution actually give you in terms of technology capability, integration solution. Stefan talked about the cloud versus the on-premise factor. So is the solution or the in-house or the best of breed technology actually giving you the ability to either do a cloud-based or a local client-based integration solution? Second one is maintenance time that's needed on solutions that actually that are actually implemented. Do you have the capability and the time and the material to maintain these processes? And lastly, monitoring and error management and the resolution thereof. Do you have a process in place, and do you have monitoring in place to solve issues that come up? Second main point under best practice in industry is master records and a single version of the truth. So in industry, you might have you might have a single source of the truth, and that needs to be in an applicable system. If you talk about general ledger codes, this can only mainly be maintained by financial stakeholders, because they actually know what the cost allocation looks like, and they know what the structure looks like of your general ledger codes. Third one, are refining high level and detailed record definitions. In many cases, your main asset register and the master of that might be the ERP, because this is actually where the purchasing and the lifecycle process sits. But more detail can be set up in the EMS system to sub-asset and component level, and that can be integrated vice versa. Next one is the interoperability of EAM and ERP and CMS systems. Interoperability is making sure that your middleware actually can operate between the systems, even though one of the systems are off. So it's important to make sure that your integration itself is not dependent on both systems actually being online and available. You need to be able to process data from the EAM system and know when the ERP system is not available or not accessible at that stage. So interoperability is extremely important. Secure data transfer. You go into a lot of detail around this, but yeah, it's just a crucial aspect when planning data integration. Each department or person in the organization should only access information that are really relevant to them, and data should flow point to point with little or no chance for a data leak or exposure to the external world. So make sure that the data that you transfer is actually secure. And one of the last main points in monitoring and reporting in industry is monitoring and reporting. And what's important in this case is that it's absolutely crucial that you, as I mentioned, that you actually have a system health monitor, and that you have a good view of actually what's happening with your processes, and if something fails, that you have a process to follow to actually solve what may go wrong. And to that point, I quickly just want to go through some details and some stats that we actually sit with on a daily basis in terms of how important it is to have monitoring and reporting in place. So us as a company in our integration landscape run on an average of about almost 1.5 million executions per month on average. And execution is basically a process running to either get data or send data from one application to the next. So it's an immense amount of executions running all over the place on a monthly basis. on a daily basis, we're running on an average about 48,000 executions of processes trying to integrate data from one system to the next. In the past month, we've had the peak daily records that have been processed is just over 1.4 million per day. And that's typically a record that needs to be either updated or deleted, or something has to happen with that record. Some processing has to happen with that record from one system to the next. And we need to be aware if that record reached the target system successfully. And on average per day, we have over 970,000 records that we process. So why am I sharing this? And why am I sharing this context? So basically my point is that it's extremely important that you have a good overview and a good understanding of what processes are running where. I quickly just want to show you one or two examples of some of our dashboards that we use. This is typically data that's processed and where we monitor the response times of some of the systems that we integrate with. So we basically say for a connection to some system, what is the average time that it actually takes to execute this process, and how long are we waiting for a response? Are there any issues in the time that we're waiting for a response? This is another example of just what data transfers are we busy with at the moment? Where are we on the scale of document counts or record counts, and are there any process level errors that we might need to address? So yeah, important to have an overview, important to have an action plan, and important to have the ability to monitor and address issues. Okay, so my second last sort of topic of today is just how to think about the integration. So I'm going to go into a few practical 6 or 7 practical steps to follow after you've went through all of these considerations and all of these pre-checks almost. What now to do to get from this step to starting with development on an integration. The first one is identifying the source and the target. Where's the data you may be interested in coming from, and where is it going? Second one is formalizing common or reference data. This is basically just a fancy word to say, make sure that your different systems map, the different field mappings are set out between the different systems. The target system might need certain mandatory fields that your source system might or might not have, and it's important to early on establish what those fields are and what those data requirements are, so that you can make an informed decision on it. Next one is technical considerations and the existing architecture. So technical considerations, typically, are you going to have a local integration that runs on the client network perhaps? Are you going to have a cloud-hosted or cloud-based integration? Do you have the ability to transfer the data from one application to the next in the protocol that they use? So it's really just looking into some of the technical aspects and the ability in terms of the data transfer. The next one is the staging area versus the end-to-end system. Will data actually be flowing from one system to the next, or will the data need to be placed in some staging table, some staging database, perhaps a shared folder that one party adds a file and the next party picks it up? Obviously, the pro and the good side of the end-to-end system is data flows from one system to the next. So already when you try to post data to the target system and the target system has a connectivity or a communication issue, you already have an idea that there's an issue and that you need to act on it. You immediately get a response from that target system whether it was a success or a fail, and you can react on it. Scheduled versus real-time data transfer, and many times when I bring this point up, the audience already goes for the real-time data transfer, but it's important to think about what data you need available in the system. If you need data available for a once in a week or once in a month reporting capability, then a bulk data load in the evening on a scheduled basis when the system is not that busy, I think should work and should do the trick, because you're running a report at the end of the month. In other cases, you might have a need to have that available instantly, and then you need a real-time data transfer process. And lastly, define it as part of a documented business process. Make sure that you don't go against the existing or the planned process, and make sure that your goal is still to ease the process that's implemented. Okay, so my time is running out a bit, so I'm going to go through 2 quick examples and maybe just skip 2 in the interest of time for today. The first one that I want to touch on is a system monitoring type business challenge or requirement, and this is in the IoT context. So our business challenge in this client example or reference is that machinery is already monitored by a third-party SCADA type system, and OnKey is already implemented. OnKey EAMS is already implemented to facilitate work management and actually manages this plant scheduled and non-scheduled work. Once a machine stops for whatever reason, the operator actually records the stoppage reason for that machine, and if it's a breakdown, a technician must do the repairs as soon as possible. So there's a machine that monitors, but already you can see the EAMS manages the work and needs to know who to send out when. So there's a data silo, evidently. Lastly, data accuracy is essential because that's going to be used for reporting purposes on downtime and actual usage, which will also relate to usage-based maintenance for scheduled work in the future. This slide just talks a bit about the process that we followed in getting to a solution, and I'm going to run through this a bit quick, but this just states that in the process to get to a solution, there might be certain issues or certain walls that you get to that you need to solve, and this just illustrates that it is actually quite easy to, in the context of what I mentioned and the practical steps that I mentioned to get to a solution. First one is work order entity creation. So for a work order, it's needed that certain mandatory fields, things like the asset and the importance, you need to specify, because there are specific next steps that follow from that. So it's important to make sure that you have mandatory fields available from the source system. That obviously means that we needed to have a source system alteration because of asset data and importance data that needs to be available in that system. So that had an effect on the existing architecture, because now there's a sort of an initial loop back from your EAMS system to make sure that the source is updated with asset type data and availability thereof. There is additional third-party dependent on the data that we get from the monitoring type data that we get. So we needed to make sure that third-party system actually still worked as expected with the change in the source. Valuable and secure data transfer requirements. So because this was data that relates to production content, production, manufacturing details, how long it takes for data for something to be manufactured, and actually specifically what needed to manufacture. There's a big security requirements. So we decided to make sure that the data only transfers from one system to the next on the client environment itself. And we implemented a specific authentication mechanism to make sure that that data is only accessed by someone that authenticates successfully. And because there are some assets that are critical, autism will be needed as soon as possible. So the data transfer from the monitoring system was transferred in real time to the on-key system so that the work order can be generated and sent accordingly. Okay, and just the solution at the end of the day is we have accurate and real-time information integrated from this monitoring system to the on-key system. The solution receives that breakdown information from the monitoring system, validates it, and performs certain actions. These actions typically are creating a work order, updating downtime and asset type information, as well as cancelling some of the work due to source system alterations. So someone realizing that it's not an applicable problem that they should look into. Okay. And lastly, the third-party system also already monitors cycle counts and usage-based type data. So we also then use that to actually populate on-key with running hours of those machines. Okay. And then the other example that I quickly want to go through is the supplier location and management. And the problem or the business challenge that we set with for this example is basically that manual supplier location is time consuming. So work is generated and we need to send someone out to attend to the work. So that happened manually at that stage. Often human error led to incorrect allocation and supplier call out. So we needed to limit the human error behind it. And then also each job is quoted, approved, and invoiced manually at that stage before a solution was put in place, which puts administrative strain on the team responsible for managing this process. At the end of the day, the solution that we added was structured data input to the EAM system. So making sure that we have a up-to-date system of the up-to-date record of the latest available suppliers, as well as their details. The system then automates the allocation to specific suppliers based on the type of work that we're busy with and the trade of that supplier, location, so where the work is needed, the average costs, depending on the work that was logged, as well as the availability or the responsiveness of that supplier. Implement basically a process that allocates a supplier depending on certain fields available. And then lastly, the automated approval for the quotes and the invoices based on pre-approved estimates on work needed for repair. So there was data available that could tell us what the average cost is to actually do certain types of work, and a process was put in place to pre-approve some of those estimates depending on the quote received from the client. Okay, I have one or two other examples that I'm going to skip through for now, and just end off with a general materials interface integration where data, the business challenge is really just that we have a third-party system already rich in data, and that was used in the traditional application to application integration sense. So the first step in this solution was to make sure that the master data was integrated, warehouses, material master, etc. And the second part of it was we needed to make sure that the business process for requesting spares and the costs for those spares are integrated. So we implemented transactional data integration between the two systems in support of that business process. And that's the last example. What a mouthful. Thanks, everyone. I I hope the examples together with the practical considerations really helped you in actually just placing yourself in the shoes of the steps needed to follow and the steps you need to follow to actually get to a solution-based system integration. Dirk, back to you.
Brilliant, JP. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Obviously the practical considerations, and I think the key message was, and it certainly is for me, you don't have to be scared. There's no dark magic or dark arts involved in building integrations anymore. It can be structured, it can be well thought through, and the technology certainly allows for that. And I think certainly the examples you showed is proof to that. And there's many more. It was clear you had more examples than what time allowed. I think that also should create some confidence, that there's many different use cases, and all of these use cases can be solved through this structured approach. And then obviously on the monitoring and reporting side, and I think, if I can just, from experience say, that was always a bit of the tricky bit. You build the integration and then you kind of hope and pray that these things will continue to run in the back end and create this value for you as a business. But I mean, the visibility into that, has been a challenge, and the way the technology have evolved over the last couple of years, and allowing you that absolute transparency into what is happening, where's the longer running processes, where's the connection problems, all of these things, and really allowing teams to actively monitor that and addressing those proactively, I think should give us a lot of confidence, the audience in this webinar, a lot of confidence that, integration doesn't have to be something that frightens us anymore. In fact, it's something that one should embrace. And if you can embrace it and really identify those key places within your business process or within your business that can really unlock a lot of value, and a structured approach like we've discussed here today is then obviously the right answer to solving that. So thanks so much. I think we're out of time really to go in a full-blown Q&A session. You're more than welcome to reach out to either myself, Stefan, or JP. Any questions that was posted, we'll answer those in written reply, or you're welcome to reach out to any one of us, and we'll correspond with you either via email or any other platform, and love to continue the conversation outside of this webinar. So I'd like to thank Stefan and JP for their preparation and putting together a very interesting topic. Yeah, and to all the participants today, or attendees at least, thanks for your attendance. It means a lot to us, and yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation again in a future webinar. So good day to all of you, and yeah, hope to see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.